Good evening, I'm Nima and this is Forum Daily for Monday, May 30th. We start tonight's newscast with Canada's latest moves in the fight against gun violence. Firearms legislation tabled in Parliament this afternoon included a national freeze on importing, buying, or selling all handguns. The government says the bill would also take away gun licenses from people involved in acts of domestic abuse or criminal harassment, such as stalking. They also plan to fight gun smuggling and trafficking by increasing criminal penalties, providing more tools to investigate firearms crimes, and strengthening border measures. Meanwhile, retired Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour has released a scathing report on the Canadian Armed Forces' resistance to change. This despite decades of scandals, criticism, and broken promises. She makes 48 recommendations, saying it's long past time for the military to scrap traditions and structures that perpetuate a sexualized culture. She says some of the military's members are more at risk of harm from their comrades on a day-to-day basis than they are from the enemy. And this must change. The Canada Border Services Agency has a backlog of nearly 300,000 Nexus applications. There was a sharp downturn in applicants during the pandemic, but the CBSA says the backlog is the result of ongoing pandemic-related office closures. The U.S. has reopened its offices to process applications for the program, which allows pre-approved travelers from both countries to pass through separate, speedy lines at the border. But Canada and the U.S. are in discussions about when to reopen Canadian enrollment centers. Moving to Manitoba now, where the government says an overland flood warning is being issued for residents in the province's southeast corner. 40 to 60 millimeters of rain is in the forecast over the next 3 days. The province is also issuing a severe wind effect warning for tomorrow around the south basins of Lake Winnipeg, Lake Manitoba, Lake Winnipegosis, and Dauphin Lake. Nearby residents are being asked to prepare for water levels expected to rise over 5 feet along the shorelines. From floods to food, 3 of Ontario's 4 major political parties are promising to take steps to lower the price of food. But an expert says some of the main factors leading to rising costs are out of the province's hands. Mike Von Masseau is an associate professor in the Department of Food, Agricultural, and Resource Economics at the University of Guelph, and he cites extreme weather events and the war in Ukraine as examples. He notes Ukraine and Russia account for 30% of the world's wheat trade, and wheat prices have gone up as trade volumes decline. Dr. Von Masseau notes there has also been significant drought in the western parts of North America, including the prairies. Meanwhile, tough new rules proposed by an American regulator could force Canada's largest oil companies to disclose their Scope 3 emissions. Companies that trade on U.S. stock exchanges would have to make public the emissions created when customers use their products, such as burning gasoline in a car. More than 80% of the emissions produced by fossil fuels are actually created at the point of combustion when customers use the product. Most Canadian energy companies currently only account for the greenhouse gases created during the extraction and production of oil. Activists say investors have a right to know a company's complete carbon footprint. On the East Coast, a pair of new Arctic and offshore patrol ships have been named in a Sunday afternoon ceremony on the Halifax waterfront. The names honor 2 of the country's naval heroes during the Second World War. Bottles of Nova Scotian wine were broken over the bows of the HMCS Margaret Brooke and HMCS Max Bernays, acknowledging their construction at the Halifax shipyard. Both ships are part of a fleet of 6 Arctic and offshore patrol ships being delivered to the Royal Canadian Navy. All right, staying in the East, as Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Andrew Furey has condemned a racist attack on 2 Muslim teenagers in St. John's. In a tweet posted yesterday, Mr. Furey said racism has no place in the province. The 2 young sisters involved say they were working at a fast food restaurant on May 7th when a man approached them and began yelling racial slurs. 18-year-old Asman Al-Saloom captured video of a man screaming at her 15-year-old sister and then shoving her, nearly knocking her to the ground. Platinum Jubilee celebrations honoring Queen Elizabeth's 70-year reign are underway in the UK. Unofficially, the event has spurred the creation of specialty cocktails in pubs, sales in stores, and a special pop-up corgi cafe. On the official side of things, the 4 days of pomp and pageantry in central London will include the Queen and family's Platinum Jubilee balcony appearance on Thursday. After the break, we'll take a look at investing with Thomas Caldwell of Caldwell Securities Limited. Stay with us. The Toronto stock market is up more than 100 points in early trading. To start off a week that will include the latest interest rate announcement from the Bank of Canada. Economists expect the central bank is going to raise its key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point to 1.5%. Global stocks and U.S. futures are higher as well after Wall Street rebounded from a 7-week string of declines. And China eased antivirus curbs on businesses in Shanghai and Beijing. Wall Street's benchmark S&P 500 index finished Friday up 6.6% for its biggest weekly gain in 18 months. Well, with all the ups and downs in the markets, knowing how to successfully invest can be difficult. One person who has navigated the financial industry for over 55 years now is Mr. Thomas Caldwell, chair of Caldwell Securities Limited. He joins us now to unpack his approach to Bay Street. Sir, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima.
Now, as we've mentioned, you've been on Bay Street in the financial industry for over 55 years now. How do you motivate yourself on a daily basis?
Well, probably the same way I did when I first came into the business. I saw it as an ongoing puzzle. Everything in the world that's going on connects eventually with markets. So it's a continuing mental challenge that keeps you alert, keeps your brain working. So I generally like what I do, and I generally like the people I do it with, and I appreciate my clients. So it's always something to do. And I do not believe in retiring. So I plan to do this as long as I possibly can.
And I also heard something really interesting recently, that you have marble statues of bears throughout your office. Now, considering that everyone wants a bull market, why do you surround yourself with bears?
Well, I don't surround, every office we have, it's usually an Eskimo carving of a bear. And I do it to remind a couple of things. Obviously, people prefer bull markets because we're all smart when the market's going up. But I want to remind people of risk. And very often in a euphoric, positive market, you can forget what risk is about. Now, people learned this in the last little while. So it's to remind people of risk. The bear is always out there, and you just have to keep in mind. So all decisions come down to risk and reward, except for, of course, affairs of the heart, which are not rational. But typically, investment decisions or others are risk and reward. And the other thing about bear markets is I generally trade large cap companies. The only way I can create value or above market performance is to buy things when nobody wants them. So I kind of like bear markets as presenting bargains to me. And my job is to see, is this problem fatal? Is it going to go away? How quickly, etc. So it's to remind people of risk, but also to remind people of opportunities. And so it's sort of a reverse metaphor, if you will.
And we also know that you're very passionate about speaking to the next generation of investors. So what do you tell them to excite them about the future?
Well, I think part of, young people, when you have children, you realize after 16, nobody listens to you, but they do watch you. And I think our younger people, we have interns in the summer, and they're all great young people. And again, a lot of them have come off this very difficult COVID period in schools. So my job is to try to wean them off the computer, reintroduce them to personal contact. And it's really satisfying, particularly when you get older. I want to be an encourager for anybody, but certainly young people. And so part of my witness to them is the mere fact I'm here in my late 70s and I'm still going to work every day, still chuckling and laughing a fair amount, having fun at what I do. And I always keep saying, do what makes you come alive. If you like what you're doing, it's not work. I mean, what would I retire to do? Feed pigeons? I mean, I love this. I love doing what I'm doing. So that's an example to these young people. Find something you love doing. If you want to retire at 55 years of age, you're in the wrong job. So
do what makes you feel alive. I love that, sir. Now, after 55 long years in the business, do you have any regrets that you've experienced throughout your career?
Well, you don't get to my age without having lots of regrets. From a business point of view, listen, I don't mind. I've made mistakes, and I always keep saying there's nothing wrong with being wrong. There is with staying wrong. You make a mistake, clean it up, drive on, learn from it, and keep on moving. I guess if I had business regrets, it's where I've trusted people, put faith in people, and they've really let me down, if not become even treacherous to some degree. And I just have to remember that everybody's flawed, everybody makes mistakes, and have no real expectations. But there are a few cases of fellows that I've done business with who turned out to be quite treacherous and very costly to me, both personally and from a financial point of view. But you know what? I can't hang on to that stuff. You got to let it go. I think Nelson Mandela once said, resentments are like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. You got to get rid of it and keep on moving.
The federal government has introduced legislation to control access to firearms, but some gun control advocates are warning that it doesn't go far enough. A national freeze on importing, buying, or selling handguns is a central feature of firearm control legislation tabled today by the federal Liberals. Gun control advocates are praising the earlier assault-style firearm ban, but conservative MPs and others argue that it targets legitimate gun owners and won't prevent illegal firearms from falling into the wrong hands. Well, joining us now to give us his take on this new legislation is Dr. Irvin Waller, Emeritus Professor at the Department of Criminology at the University of Ottawa and an expert on violence prevention. Dr. Waller, welcome to Forum Daily.
Good day.
So let's start with this, sir. What is the current state of gun violence and crime in Canada?
So if we look over the last 10 years, there has been an uptick in shootings, and there has also been an uptick in the murders with handguns. We basically returned to a murder rate pretty similar to 10 years ago. So it went down for a little time and then it's been going up. But in the last 5 years, there's a clear trend up. It's not as dramatic as anything in the United States, but it is definitely going up.
Definitely a concerning trend there. Now, we mentioned a freeze on handguns in this new plan. What other legal reforms have been introduced in this legislation, sir?
Well, they have continued the action to deal with assault weapons. So the weapons that were used in Uvalde in the United States and Texas recently were AR-15s, well, one AR-15. And so they're continuing to consolidate that ban. In Canada, we've had relatively few shootings as dramatic as what happens weekly or certainly monthly in the United States and hits headlines, but the Polytechnic event was clearly an example, and the mosque attack in Quebec City was a failed attempt. The assault weapon jammed. So they're continuing to do that, and that I think is important.
And one of the biggest obstacles in gun control in Canada has been the illegal market, illegal smuggling of these weapons through the United States-Canada border. So does this legislation effectively address this issue?
Well, I think we've got to make a big distinction between assault weapons. They have not been smuggled, although the case in Nova Scotia is an exception to that. However, handguns, the police estimate somewhere around 80% of all handguns in Toronto that are used illegally have been smuggled into Canada. And basically all of the use of handguns in urban areas are illegal. These are not committed by people who have a license to own those handguns. Now, this may be different in rural areas, but the vast majority of handgun murders and shootings occur in urban areas.
Just about a minute left here, Doctor, but a lot of experts have pointed out that this is a multi-layered issue. So it's not just the banning of weapons that could fix the issue of gun violence in Canada. There needs to be support for vulnerable demographics most involved in such violence. So how can officials do that, sir? Just about over a minute left.
So this is what is missing from the federal policy. We could reduce the handgun homicides in urban areas by more than 50% in the next few years by using the knowledge we have about how to reach those young men involved in that dangerous lifestyle. These are basically street workers who go out and meet them. They're street workers who meet them when they've been shot in hospital emergency rooms. These are courses in schools that get young men to make better decisions. And I think it's important that this is much more likely to work than a ban when it is so easy to shift. It's been so easy to shift drugs across the border from the United States, and it's going to be just as easy to ship handguns across. If there's a demand for those handguns, they will come across. So let's tackle the demand in a serious way and put serious money in it and be smarter about how we do it.
An important perspective to consider. Dr. Waller, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily. Thank you. Stay with us. Up next, we've got more news from around the world, of course. Ukrainian forces are battling street to street in the city of Sevyerodonetsk. EU leaders gather in a new show of support and solidarity for Ukraine, and a lot more news from around the world after that, so stay with us. We'll be right back. The mayor of a Ukrainian city at the epicenter of the Russian offensive says fierce street battles are going on there. The mayor of Sevyerodonetsk says there is no power and no communications, adding, quote, "The city has been completely ruined." He added that 12 to 13,000 civilians left in the city are sheltering in basements and bunkers to escape relentless Russian bombardment. But the number of victims is rising every hour. Meanwhile, European Union leaders are gathering in a new show of solidarity with Ukraine. This even as the bloc continues to wrestle with how to make a Russia oil embargo work. Discussions underway in Brussels are pointing to a solution that could see an embargo on oil brought in by sea. This while leaving oil that is piped in untouched. In a video message, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told the leaders of the 27-member bloc that they must remain united and target Russia's lucrative energy sector. All of this comes as families across Africa are paying about 45% more for wheat flour as Russia's war in Ukraine blocks exports from the Black Sea. Some countries like Somalia get more than 90% of their wheat from Russia and Ukraine. That's forcing many people to substitute wheat for other grains. But the United Nations is warning that the price hikes are coming as many parts of Africa are facing drought and hunger. The UN already had warned that an estimated 13 million people were already facing severe hunger in the wider Horn of Africa region as a result of a persistent drought. The World Food Program chief says Russia's war on Ukraine is piling catastrophe on top of catastrophe for the world's poor. The French news broadcaster BFM TV says a 32-year-old French journalist was killed Monday in Ukraine. It says the journalist was fatally hit by a shell shrapnel while covering a Ukrainian evacuation operation. BFM said Frédéric Leclerc-Imhoff was killed as he was covering a humanitarian operation in an armored vehicle. This was near Sevyerodonetsk, a key city in the Donbass region. French President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute to Mr. Leclerc-Imhoff. Mr. Macron tweeted that he was in Ukraine to show the reality of the war. Moving to China now, which has fallen short on its bold plan for 10 Pacific nations to endorse a sweeping agreement covering everything from security to fisheries. But Foreign Minister Wang Yi has had plenty of smaller wins on his island-hopping tour of the region. Mr. Wang was in Fiji on Monday for a key meeting with foreign ministers from 10 small Pacific nations. He and Fijian Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama spoke at a news conference on Monday, but he abruptly left as reporters tried to shout questions, leaving many details unanswered. Still, it was clear that the other nations had not endorsed China's plan. The World Health Organization's top monkeypox expert doesn't expect a pandemic, but she is warning that anyone is at potential risk of the disease. Dr. Rosamund Lewis says there are still many unknowns about monkeypox. This includes how exactly it's spreading and whether the suspension of mass smallpox immunization decades ago may somehow be speeding its transmission. Dr. Lewis says the agency is investigating whether monkeypox is spread via sex or through the air, and if people without symptoms are capable of transmitting the disease. She said past outbreaks have suggested the disease does not spread easily. 2 French cabinet ministers are defending police who fired tear gas and pepper spray at Liverpool supporters at Saturday's Champions League final. Some children were sprayed. The sports and interior ministers are blaming industrial levels of fraud that saw up to 40,000 people try to enter the Stade de France on the outskirts of Paris with fake tickets or none at all. Liverpool lost the final 1-0 to Real Madrid. Meanwhile, a man disguised as an old woman in a wheelchair threw a piece of cake at the Mona Lisa. Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece at the Louvre Museum is behind glass, and the cake attack only left a white creamy smear behind. Security guards were filmed escorting the wig-wearing man away. A Louvre statement confirmed the attack. All right, well, Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities is displaying a trove of ancient artifacts dating back 2,500 years. They were recently unearthed at the famed necropolis of Saqqara near Cairo. They include 250 painted sarcophagi with well-preserved mummies inside. This, as well as 150 bronze statues of ancient deities and bronze vessels used in rituals of Isis, the goddess of fertility. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.